When it comes to your MBA experience, there are probably two questions on your mind right now, and that is, what is this experience going to be like? And the second question, what is the impact of that experience? My name is Chris Westfall, and I'm an MBA graduate of Texas Christian University. And I am here to talk with a panel of experts about their experiences and about the impact that TCU created. And in just a moment, I'll introduce you to these individuals so that they can share with you their stories. Obviously, I wouldn't be here hosting this panel if I didn't believe that the TCU MBA was something that was incredibly valuable to me. And hopefully, it's an experience that can be valuable to you. So with that introduction, let me introduce you first and foremost to Dan GEER. He is an assistant brand manager at Procter & Gamble. And Dan, if you would just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what led you to TCU and how you came to be in the role that you're in right now.
Well, just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I actually am originally from Florida, and after I finished undergrad, I worked in the front office for several different professional sports teams. After I'd done that for a few years, I really wanted to get something a little bit more for something that was a little more fulfilling, a little bit more for my time. I really looked around at a lot of different MBA programs. I knew I wanted to do an MBA program. I interviewed at several different ones, but it was like a clear-cut, no-brainer decision for me after interviewing with several different MBA programs to go to TCU, because it was definitely the best one that I had.
You said it was a clear-cut decision to come to TCU. Two quick questions for you. One, were you hoping that the TCU MBA would continue your career in sports marketing? And two, what was it that made it such a clear-cut decision?
So to answer your question number one, no, not necessarily. I had left that option open to me, but I was looking to do something a little bit different. And why it was a clear-cut decision versus anywhere else. From the minute I first set foot on campus at TCU, it felt like a family atmosphere. It felt like everybody was there, everyone was supporting each other. Really, there was a concern in me that maybe it wasn't going to be like a friendly atmosphere, that was going to be very competitive and those sort of things. And it was the furthest thing from that when I went to TCU. Everyone was friendly. It was like, joining a new family, really.
Can you talk a little bit about the extended family of TCU? I'm talking specifically about the alumni network and how that played a role in your development and your career.
So the TCU alumni network is very special when you think of it in the context of like alumni networks around. It's not the largest in the world because TCU is a smaller school, obviously, but it's a very close-knit alumni network. If anyone ever reaches out to me and says, hey, I'm a student at TCU, I will respond right away. And I found that to be the exact same thing with alumni that I reached out to. They were always there, always available. Every time I reached out and said, hey, I'm a TCU MBA student, and I see that you're an alumni, every time someone would respond, get back to me, and was there for coaching, talking, mentorship, whatever I wanted. The alumni network, whenever you reach out, it was always there.
Talk a little bit about the process that led you to Procter & Gamble. I mean, obviously, P&G, you're working there in Cincinnati at the headquarters on Old Spice, iconic global brand. How did the network of TCU alum help you to get where you are today?
So I think when you look at anyone's career path, it's always a journey, right? I think we meet people and we see a job title or place, and you assume they just went in a straight line there. For me, that's not the case, and I think that's probably what most people would also say about their career paths. After I finished at TCU, or as I was finishing at TCU, I'd gotten in contact with some people close to the MBA program about a position with Nielsen, and been there for about 2 years. I got an email from one of my professors and someone else who worked at P&G and said, hey, I got your email from one of your professors at TCU and said that you might be interested in an opportunity here. Is this something you might want to do?
Your role at P&G came from a recommendation from a TCU professor. Is that right?
That is correct, yes. A couple months later, I was in my truck driving north from Texas to Ohio. I mean, the process seems like it happened all that quick, too.
What can you say to folks who might be watching us and thinking, wow, P&G, that is a competitive, cutthroat environment. It's intense. I mean, and again, I'm not on the inside. You are. Maybe you can speak to that. But how was it coming from the family atmosphere of TCU and the networking that you enjoyed did that prepare you for the competitive environment of P&G?
So one thing I tell people all the time is TCU's academic programs and their academic rigor are second to none out there. And the academic side of what I got from TCU definitely prepared me for what I do here. And so often there's so many things that we go through, whether it's strategy or finance, accounting, those sort of things that we do here on a daily basis, where I am very, very confident in what I can do and very well prepared from the academic side of what happened at TCU. One of the other things that I also say is in any job, even when it's competitive and cutthroat, and I wouldn't even say P&G is cutthroat, but it is very competitive, you still have to maintain relationships. And that is, no matter how competitive you are, no matter how much you want to succeed, no matter how much you want to be the best, you still have to maintain relationships. And that is something that I learned in my time at TCU. If you look at the way that the cohorts were designed at TCU with a smaller group of about 5 to 6 people, that's really how most big companies organize their teams too. On the Old Spice team here, we have a team of 4 that does the Old Spice Global, and we have a team of 4 that does the Old Spice North America, and we work hand in hand with those teams, but really closely with our teams within our own little cohort here. And that is really the same learning and team structure that we had when I was at TCU.
Outstanding. Thank you for sharing that. You know, talking about the importance of relationships and teams leads me to our next guest, our next expert, Paige Sabo, who is working at PepsiCo. And Paige, your experience echoes, I think, in some ways, what Dan was talking about, the importance of working in teams and the academic rigor that allowed you to do so many things in your career. But I know from our previous conversation that you went through a bit of a transformation at TCU. In fact, you weren't planning on going to TCU for the MBA program, and you learned some things about networking that were quite surprising because Paige, you've told me you're an introvert. Is that right?
I am. I am a 100% introvert.
Can you talk a little bit about how the alumni network helped you to land at PepsiCo?
Yes, it is such a wonderful story, actually. So a few weeks into our program, TCU hosted a PepsiCo case competition. And knowing that I kind of had an interest in CPG because it kind of paralleled sports and a little bit in the fact that they're both kind of competitive in nature, I signed up to be a participant. And so while I was there, I got to interact with some of the PepsiCo execs. But even after interacting with them, I was like, wow, I really like these people. They love what they're doing. They're passionate about FRITO, just everything. And there was one individual there who's a TCU alumni that I connected with and just got to know, and we started talking, and he was like, yeah, definitely, like, keep paying attention to Pepsi, and these are some other people that work at Pepsi, so make sure you reach out and talk to them. So I did, and everyone pretty much responded to me, which is awesome and very rare. But again, I think that's the power of like TCU's network being not incredibly vast per se, but definitely people really care. It was October of second year. I got invited to do what they call Super Days, which is they bring in a couple of people to interview to fill in the spots that they didn't hire from their intern class. And I ultimately landed the job, but I got to continue my experience with Pepsi throughout the rest of school because the same consulting project, there's a second year that gets to lead the team, and I got to be that team person. So I was kind of learning a little bit about my job before I got to start, which was really cool, and getting to meet and interact with some more people over at Pepsi. So it was awesome.
For folks who are watching this video, who are thinking about making a decision based on your experience and the connections within the alumni network, what could you share for people who are at that decision point in their lives right now? What would you say?
I would say reflect on the network and how the stories that you hear, because I obviously just kind of told you a long-winded story about how I got my job, but what people don't know behind that is, so these executives that I mentioned that I interacted with, they spent hours mock interviewing me before my interview, and they have important jobs, they have other things to do, but they genuinely cared. And not just the people at Pepsi that were helping me, but even the people in our graduate career center and our admissions, everyone knew I had this interview coming up, and I mean, any second I could, people were helping me like prepare and mock interview, whether it was current students, like I just mentioned, or even people at Pepsi. So I think the value of our network and the value of, honestly, the TCU family is next to none. So reflecting on the general overview vibe of the program is very important.
And having a team around you that's as focused on your success as you are is really
Right.
what you're describing. I mean, from the Career Center to the professors. I mean, as Dan was mentioning, you know, a professor actually provided the recommendation that helped him to get into P&G. And it's about having that team around you. And even though I went through the MBA program many years ago, my experience was very similar, and I was able to build that team, acquire that team, be a part of that team. And when I say team, I mean, it's a group of people and alumni and a network that was as focused on my success as I was. And even when you know, I thought things were going this way and I wanted to make some changes, sort of like what you were describing, people were there to help me to make those changes and make those transitions and to say, what is it that you really want to do? And that was really, really impactful. And I know that TCU made a big impact for our next expert, Bo. Wow, your story. I mean, right now, Bo, you are working at American Airlines. You are working at the largest airline in the world. So I want to start off with kind of an unusual question for you, if you're up for it. Tell me about your first airplane ride.
Actually, my first flight on an airplane was coming to the U.S., coming to start my MBA program at TCU. I come from a country in Southeast Europe called Serbia, so air travel is not that prevalent over there. Not everybody travels every day like in the U.S. So it wasn't American, it was on Lufthansa, but you know, everybody makes mistakes.
There you go. But I just, you know, Bo, because we have spoken before, and knowing your story, and I was quite inspired by it because of the amount of investment personally for you, leaving your home country, coming to the United States, looking for a better life for yourself, and you've been able to really create that. So first of all, congratulations on all your success, and very proud that TCU could be a part of that for you. But can you talk about how you viewed that step to leave your home country, to come to the United States, and then what sort of network did you find through TCU to help you realize your dreams and your goals?
I have a lot of similar experiences like Paige and Dan, but for international students, it's a little bit different, right? We're not just making a change in our careers, we're making a change in our lives. So it's a very, very difficult decision to which city, which country, which program you go to. And that kind of adds a little bit to the weight of the decision. So for me, when I started interacting with the US MBA programs, TC really stood out real fast. Before I got a thank you note or response from another university, out of the 5 or 6 that I was talking to, TC already had interviewed me and had an acceptance letter on my desk.
I'm sure you took that real leap of faith when you got on that plane to come to TCU. Was your experience what you expected, more than what you expected, particularly in the area of relationships and the alumni network? What did you discover?
It was much more than I expected. I could never imagine that, first of all, that kind of structure where you don't have to think about it. Everything is laid out for you and managed for you. You just have to show up, as they say. You just have to show up. So that's number one. It wasn't all up to me to figure it out. There are people that are, at TCU that do this for a living, and they know how to do it, and they're really good at it, and they bring you into that process. TCU starts you off with, for international students, we meet about a week or 2 before everybody else comes to campus, just to get that welcome and that, the process started to get you, used to the States. And they bring 4 international students from different generations to interact with you and talk to you and share their experiences. So if you come there and you're a little bit, as we discussed, you're nervous, maybe you're afraid a little bit, but then you talk to people that graduated a year ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, that all have flourishing careers, and you can see them, and they're just like you. They were in your shoes. You now know that it's possible for you too. You ask them what they did. Very easy to notice a pattern. They listen to the Graduate Career Center advices, and they follow the processes, and they leverage TC relationships. So you try to do the same. I was much more than I expected.
When you went through the program, did you have concerns about getting the H-1 visa? And how did TCU and the alumni network help you to overcome those concerns?
Well, getting an MBA is a huge investment. Doesn't matter where you're from. So you will be anxious. You will be concerned about getting that internship, getting that job, getting the salary level that you're looking for. I was not that nervous because I had that support. Now, again, it was time to be nervous because it was 2008, 2009, and everybody knows how difficult it was to get a good paying MBA level job at that time. So, but I had a plan. I had a process that I mapped out with the TCU graduate career program. For me, as we mentioned, it was after being excited flying to the U.S. for the first time to know that American Airlines recruits heavily from TCU. It was a very easy decision for me to make American Airlines number one priority. So after that, kind of everything lined up, everything fell into place. My first week at TCU, I had a mock interview with 2 hiring managers from American Airlines. Those are alums of TCU. They volunteered to come and do a mock interview. So there's no internship, there's no job opening. It's just my first week, and I got a chance to interact with them. After that, from those 2 managers, my network of American Airlines friends and colleagues just grew. There were a number of American Airlines alums at TCU, at events, at dinners, at presentations, etc. So it wasn't that difficult. Second-year students were also very helpful because they already had those relationships. So before you know it, I could name 25, 30 American Airlines employees in various parts of the organization that I had some relationship one way or the other, right? That I could call up and say, what's going on, how are you? That I interacted in an informal setting, etc. So back to your question, yes, you're anxious, you're nervous, you invested a lot of money and time into getting your MBA, but when you have certain, when a program steps behind you and supports you, it's much easier and takes that edge away.
Leveraging an alumni network is about effective networking and taking advantage of those relationships. And as you just mentioned, Bo, I mean, you were able to, from these initial interviews, expand very quickly and leverage relationships, because there's really 2 aspects to work. If you think about it, I mean, there's the skill set that you bring, but then there's your ability to create and foster relationships. And I'd be curious to know, Paige and Dan, what shows up for you in terms of the relationships that you gained at TCU and the relationships, how does that impact your day-to-day and the work that you do?
So for me, Chris, I think there's a couple things that I think about. One is, when you talk about relationships and networking and stuff like that, I will admit that I'm probably not a very good networker, but when you have a network like the TCU alumni network, that it's close and everyone has like good intentions towards each other, it makes it a lot easier, right? You don't have to try really, really hard to build the relationships, because you already have that one thing in common that's very, like, I guess it's kind of like, hey, if they're good enough to get into TCU and they're smart enough to say yes to that decision, they're good enough for me to have a relationship with. So that's kind of the way that I view it, and the way I think everyone viewed it made it really easy to network within that. I remember a couple of different times where I got a call from a company or something like that, where someone said, hey, we saw your resume, we'd be interested. And I said, well, I've already accepted something, but hey, I have somebody who you might want to call. I think the relationship is, because it's kind of like a family and it's a team and everyone's trying to be successful together. That was something I saw a lot while I was there, and I've seen a lot since I've been there, is when you reach out to alumni, or when I currently reach out to students, if they've already have a job. I actually reached out to a student about 2 weeks ago, and he said, well, I already have a job, but hey, do you mind talking to so-and-so? That happens all the time there, and that's something that I think is really great about the TCU program.
Yeah, I would echo exactly what you said, because the TCU MBA for me personally was a lot more than what I expected. When I came into the TCU MBA program, and I was part of that cohort before school started, one of the things that they did, the organizers of the event, they had an icebreaker, and they asked everyone in the room to stand up and talk about their last full-time job. What was your last full-time job? And so people were standing up in the room and they were saying, well, I work for a consulting firm. And someone else would stand up and say, well, I was a mortgage banker at a bank. Somebody else would stand up and say, I was a professional engineer. And then it came to me. It came to my turn. And I'm going to tell you, I was terrified. I was terrified because I had to stand up in front of my peers and tell everyone that my last full-time job was working as a professional stuntman. And that's a true story. Before I came into the MBA, I worked as a professional stuntman. I was in the stunt show out at Six Flags, which is the local amusement park in the DFW area. And from this prestigious beginning, I started my MBA career, and I felt like everyone else in the room had gotten out of a limousine and I was stepping out of a clown car, because my background was very different than most of the folks in the room. Now I'd studied hard and worked hard to get the GMAT scores that I needed. I mean, there was a reason I was in the room. But when I looked at my experience in the place that I was coming from, I was looking for a safe place, a process that could help me create the transformation that I needed. And for me in my life, I wanted to go from, the green room to the boardroom. And I wanted to know how to make that change and that transition. And to this day, I leverage the things that I learned at TCU. And when I was in between my first and second year, and it came time to go out and get an internship, I said, you know what? I'm not going to go get an internship. I'm not going to do it. I am going to go out, and instead, I'm going to work on writing a book. And people thought that was crazy. I even thought that was crazy. But my wife and I, we took off and we spent the entire summer writing a book. That book never saw the light of day. It never was published. And I thought, well, that was a great experience. I'm glad I went through that, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Cut to today, I've published 7 books. My 8th is called Leadership Language. It just came out. And I've been so fortunate I get to travel all over North America and all over the world, helping people to communicate more effectively. And that's been the focus of my work and my consulting and my coaching. Never could have done it without TCU and without the emphasis on communication skills and collaboration, the kinds of things that we're talking about here. And for me personally, the influence of the alumni network. Like you, Dan, I had a professor that made a recommendation. Like you, Paige, I worked on a consulting project that helped get me in front of the people that I needed to know. And like you, Bo, I took a couple of relationships and turned it into 20. And as a result, I started my career at what's now called Verizon. So one story among many, but a theme through all of our stories, that TCU is a place that is focused on your success, that has a process in place so that you can come and create the transformation that you need, no matter what that transformation might be, whether you're coming from sports marketing or a country in Eastern Europe, or from a place where a decision needed to be made about TCU. And that's probably the decision that you're trying to make right now. If you're looking for a school that has your best interests at heart, in a family environment that's focused on your success, and that has a network that can lead you to Fortune 100 companies, to entrepreneurship, to wherever your goals might take you, TCU, it's an interesting place. And it's been very interesting for me. Thank you for sharing your stories and for your willingness to share, to take time out to give back, because quite frankly, giving back, that's part of the spirit of TCU. And you are great examples of what the TCU Alumni Network is all about. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.